Welcome to The Right Approach. We are your hosts. I am J.W. Judge.
And I'm Barbara Hinske. This is a podcast for writers to learn more about the craft of writing as we explore a new topic every week. So let's get started.
So before we get into our topic for this week, which is about using a pen name and how to decide on that and the benefits that it can confer, and also some of the things that could be made more difficult by that, let's talk about personal updates. So in the last week, what have you had going on, I guess, either with writing or the publishing side of your author business?
So I've been busy writing the fourth book in my Guiding Emily series. I've made a decent chunk of it, and I write with a writing coach. So I've already had my first meeting with her and back at it today, and sandwiching all that in with taking care of a sick black lab, my son's black lab, who's been with me while he's been on vacation, and I've been medicating and wrangling a dog that weighs almost as much as I do. So it's been fun. So I've got some stuff I could write about, like all of life. Throws your curveball, you think, well, maybe this will find its way into a book. That's what I've been doing. What have you been working
I
on?
have been working, but not fun writing work. And I was telling you before we started recording that my next 2 months of work are going to be just totally crazy busy. And so writing has been not a lot of progress. I got probably 1,300 words in over the weekend was all I could get in. And then the last 2 days have literally been like snippets of paragraphs. I think I had 130 words yesterday that I wrote while my 7-year-old was taking a shower. And and that's it. Like, that's all I could get in. And the day before that was me writing a few things down while waiting in car line to pick him up from school on his second day of school. And that is all I had time for. Because normally I write early in the mornings, but work has been so crazy that I've had to use that time for work just to stay above water. So that's, the author side of stuff has taken a back seat. And as we record this in mid-August, I've got my third novel coming out on September 20th. And so as this episode comes out, that'll only be, I think, a week out. But the ability to do anything and market it has been severely hampered by, the career that puts food on the table. And that's just kind of the nature of things right now.
Well, as some advice from someone who is old enough to be your mother, give yourself some grace in all of this. It's not the end of the world that you can't write right now. It's just like if you injure yourself and you don't go to the gym for a while, and then you go back and you think, oh man, I'm starting from scratch. And then pretty soon you realize, well, I'm really not. That's what it'll be like when you go back. And so, yeah, let's get that third book out. You and I will talk privately about how to market that and what I can do to help you get that going. That's an important thing.
Okay.
It's all going to be good.
That's right. It'll be fine. We are in this for the long haul.
Yeah.
And I know that going in, and it's okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about pen names, because we touched on this in our first episode that both of us use pen names. We started using pen names. Obviously that's a conscious decision, but we had different reasons for doing it. And let's start with you. Why did you choose to use a pen name?
Yeah. So I was still practicing law when I published my first book, and I had no idea whether I could write or not. I was not from a writing background. My undergraduate was in engineering. So I had none of that side of my brain. And I thought, oh, I do not want to publish something and humiliate myself professionally. So I just published under my maiden name. And it turned out it wasn't horrible. So, but I'm still glad that I used my maiden name. So how about you?
So I obviously still practice law, and before I started any fiction writing, I had done a lot of writing for industry magazines and for publications and journals, and also writing a law blog and writing books about law practice. So
Mhm.
my marketing and branding as a lawyer were firmly established under my given name, Jeremy Richter. And actually, all of the writing is done under Jeremy W. Richter. Um, in part because the W is in part because there is another Jeremy Richter who had a website
Mhm.
already and was a fitness instructor. And so I needed the W to get the URL that I wanted. And
Mhm.
so all of that had been firmly established. And when you search my name, the things related to my law practice are what come up. And when clients and potential clients or colleagues search my name, those are the things that I want and need to come up, is the things related to the law practice. And so when I started writing fiction, I knew that I wanted a layer of differentiation to some degree or another between the fiction writing and the legal practice, whether
Mhm.
it's the writing or everything else. And so I went through several back and forth iterations of what that was going to be. And would that just be me writing under my initials, J.W. Richter? But I thought that that probably wasn't quite enough.
Mhm.
And so Richter means judge in German.
Oh,
And so I just went with J.W. Judge, which is
I like that.
enough of a difference that there isn't going to be an overlap. But I'm also not trying to create an entirely separate person or identity because it's still me. I just need it not to be me for marketing and branding purposes. And so it's close enough to home that it still feels like me.
Mm-hmm. I think it's got a real snappy sound to it. It it rolls well off the tongue and all of that. When you chose it, did you Google to see what your competition was, run it through Amazon to see if there's some other JW Judge writing something that you wouldn't want to be associated with?
I did because I've been listening to podcasts for years and years
Yeah.
now and know that that's something that can happen. And so, yeah, I made sure that there wasn't that name somewhere else out there being used. And, there is one person under that name who has like co-authored a scholarly article of some kind, but just one was all I ever turned up. And so I was comfortable with it and ran with it. And so, here we are a couple years later now, and that's what I've done all the fiction writing as, and even have authored my first nonfiction book about writing, which I've decided to do under the same pen name, because it fits within that brand. And I didn't want to have to deal with a second pen
Yeah.
name because that would just be too much.
Yeah.
And so I know that, some people say if you do different genres or if you write fiction and nonfiction, you should do those under separate names because of also bots and recommendations and all those things can get muddled up. But I don't have the bandwidth to deal with three different names. I can do two, and that's fine. And it seems to have worked pretty well for James Scott Bell, who's been one of the writers who writes fiction and nonfiction that I've followed and read for years. So I just decided to take his approach.
Well, and I think that's wise. I mean, Mark Dawson does that. He uses his name, Alessandro Torre, does the same thing. They're both lawyers who write fiction and have big nonfiction presences within the writing community. So I think that's smart. One of my author friends, Elena Johnson, writes under three pen names and she sells boatloads of books. She is huge. And she somehow manages to keep three pen names going. Um, I think it really depends. You're more likely to need to do this if you write different genres, particularly if you're writing romance. Okay. If you're writing spicy romance and sweet, clean romance, no, no, no. You do not want those universes to coincide whatsoever. The spicy people might be okay with the clean stuff, but the clean people will burn you to the ground. So you
Well, and
can't do
that's
that.
something I've
Yeah.
thought about, not because I write in romance, but because so far the three novels that I've got are all in a series and they are all dark fantasy. I'm writing a fourth novel right now that is also fantasy, but
Mhm.
I have ideas, half written, well, not half, quarter written ideas for one is a historical novel, one is just a modern kind of family drama type thing that don't have, are not fantastical at all. And they're different genres. And I, I think that when I eventually write and publish those, I will still go ahead and do it
Mhm.
under my name. And I will have to brand the covers or something in such a way that it's very clear signal that this is different.
Yeah. I think that's wise. That's sort of what I've done. My rule of thumb is if I would read it, then it's okay if I'm writing it and it's all under my name. I'm like, I don't have the bandwidth to do another pen name. But I did write a couple of crime books. I thought, well, I've always written women's fiction that has mystery, thriller, suspense in it because of my career as a corporate lawyer in the financial services industries. I write about financial fraud and all that, and I'm always kind of leaning to that. I like it. Um, so I've always had those elements, but then I broke away and wrote a serial killer book and another one that opens with a body being dismembered, a really close in look at a body being dismembered. Now, I still don't have any sex on the page or not too many swear words because my readers don't like that. But I decided I'm not going to get a separate pen name for them. I just got a book bub on one of them and they took it from women's fiction and said, no, it should be in crime fiction. So I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. But what I did on my website and on my book jackets and on my A+ content on Amazon, I branded them as part of my Who's There collection. So that tells the reader it's something different. And they're not in a series, they're two standalones, but I really sort of separate them out. And I have had readers buy them and say, I had one person email and say, I'm sorry, I can't, the one with the dismembered body, which it was quick. It was quick. But anyway, she said, I can't read this book. I had to put it aside um, because it was just too graphic. So you feel like maybe I came close to the line, but I think you can do what you want to do with
Yeah.
those kinds of artifices.
Well, and so another reason, and I hadn't even necessarily planned on talking about this, but another reason that I decided to go with the pen name is that I am a deacon in my church at home. And, you know, I it's I'm very religiously conservative and so is my church. But some of my dark fantasy novels, I mean,
Mhm.
it's fantasy, and so some folks have an aversion to that anyway. But they're, you know, the language is pretty clean, but there's violence. And
Mhm.
some people, I wanted to give people the option to either interact with that and know that side of me or not. Because when I
Mhm.
was younger in high school, I wrote a lot of poetry and it was your typical angsty, creative teenager. And, you read Edgar Allan Poe and things like that in high school and in middle school, and everybody's okay with it. But when a teenager starts writing about those things, people start expressing concerns and reservations. And that sort of thing just really stuck with me about reactions I got to things that I wrote as a teenager, and that people may not want to know that. And so,
Mhm.
that left a very lasting impression on me as a writer about how people might respond to the things you write. And so I just wanted to give that distinction for that reason as well. I'm okay with what I write. I have given it to friends and family who have similar worldviews as me and read similar things and said, give me your feedback about this.
Mhm.
Let me know if you think that, you see the world and believe similarly as I do. Let me know if you're uncomfortable with anything that I've written, because, you mentioned your serial killer book in my second book. Um, there is a serial killer,
Mhm.
and there are a couple of rough patches in it. And, so
Yeah,
you're going to have that.
yeah.
But that was another reason I did it, is because just to have that other layer of, if people want to engage with this side of me, on social media, I created a separate author Facebook page and separate author Twitter account. And, I give people an opportunity to
Mm.
know that, hey, I'm doing this other thing and it's under this name. And, if they want to interact with that and read it, then great. And if they don't have to see it. And so it gives people that option to
Mhm.
check in or not.
Yeah, I think that's very wise in keeping those worlds kind of separate. And there's also the idea that at some point, when you sell enough books, you've got a little bit of celebrity, which strikes me as an odd thing to say about myself because I feel like I'm just a very ordinary kind of gal. But I do get recognized when I go out, and I've had people ask me. I had a woman come up to me at the local baseball stadium, and she had my book. And she was so thrilled. Can you sign my book and
That's
take my picture?
incredible.
All that kind of stuff. My favorite one was on an airplane, and a woman like two rows in front of me was reading "Coming to Rosemont," and so I went up and said, after we, got turned off the seatbelt sign, and I went up and introduced myself and said, "Oh, I'm so thrilled to see you reading my book." And I said, "Would you like me to sign it for you?" And she said, "Nah, not really." So I like, oh, okay. So I kind of slunk back to my seat. But there is, in this crazy world, you do want a sense of privacy. And
Mhm.
um, you will get, sometimes people are not all that safe in how they approach other people. And even if it is safe, yeah, I feel sort of snotty saying this, or I get too many people contacting me for advice on writing or wanting to express things. And I respond to every single email and I love them. But then there's always that person who wants to make it a daily kind of email. And as I tell people, if I start doing that, I won't have time to write any more
Mhm.
books. So
Mhm.
all of that all those things are good reasons to have a little bit of separation for you.
Now, having a pen name doesn't come without difficulties, I guess, particularly as it pertains to marketing and selling books, or at least that's where I've experienced them the most, because you're starting over.
Mhm.
Your social media accounts, so for me, the social media that I use is mostly for the business, for work, is
Yeah.
LinkedIn. I use a lot and have a lot of connections on there.
Mhm.
For entertainment is Twitter. But I just peruse and scroll through Twitter a lot more than I post on it. And then
Mhm.
I have Facebook because I've had it for ages now. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, 15 years. Whenever some of the earliest, I was a college student when it, not when it came out, but shortly after. And so, like 2005 or 6 or 7 is, so I have it. I don't use it that actively, but you have hundreds of connections on these platforms. And when you write under a pen name and create a new account, you're starting from scratch.
Mhm.
And it's the same for establishing any kind of search engine presence. When I
Mhm.
started my new website and separately started a writing blog, you know, you're building from nothing. And that it's been really a lot more difficult on the fiction side to try try hard to get book sales. And I
Mhm.
have to work for everyone, it feels like, as opposed to when I've written 3 books about law practice, and those were within my profession and within the network that I'd been building for years and the people that I had relationships with and ties to. And those book sales came much easier and were a much more natural buy for people than the fiction books. So that's been my experience. How has it been for you? I guess you're further along in this certainly than I am, but
Well,
how,
and when I started, I really didn't do much with LinkedIn. In fact, I should go in. In fact, I think I have deleted my LinkedIn account because I don't use it for anything. So when I started writing and trying to get a presence online, I read stuff and thought, oh, well, I should have presence online. Okay, what does that mean? Um, and it was in the days when you needed to have a website and blog and SEO and all that. But also Facebook was the gold standard at that. It was really kind of the only thing at that time. And I've done them all and have presences on all, and everybody has to select something. But for women's fiction and cozy mystery, Facebook is still the gold standard. And I was lucky enough in my early days to hire an outside consultant who said, okay, to build your author page, you need to start a community fan page that will center on an interest that will be congruent with your readers. So you will attract people who would like your books to the community page, and then you can grow that community page and then put posts on there to advertise your books and to draw people from the community page to your author page. At that time, Downton Abbey was in its second season and it was a roaring success. So I chose Downton Abbey fans. The consultants had recommended I Love Reading or something like that. I thought, no, that's too generic. Downton Abbey fans. And oh my God, that worked like a charm. Within a month, I had 25,000 likes at the time. Now I have over 165,000. And that page just runs itself basically and has let me establish an author presence of in excess of 40,000 on my author page, and I've got an active reader group. So all of that has helped me. I've played with TikTok and have decided not to go forward with that. So I think everyone needs to just bite the bullet. It's not easy, whether you're using your own name and you haven't done it. Like you had such a big presence as a lawyer with a real you're too modest, but you have a very high level profile as an expert in law office management and those kinds of skills. You have such a thriving career and presence there that it would have been nice to grab those people and say, hey, here's mine. And I can see that wouldn't be very easy.
yeah. And you do hit my microphone. Your social media marketing on Facebook and Instagram, I follow so that I can try to piggyback off of and do similar things because they're so perfectly on brand for the type of readers that you want. And they're just really dialed in. And I follow you and I follow other people who do things differently than me because I need to adopt it enough to be effective, but change it to suit my own needs.
And I think that's how we all do it. We all look at other examples of people who are successful. And mine has been trial and error over many years. In the early days of Facebook ads, there would be times when I would be Sunday mornings, because I was still working. So Sunday mornings before church, I'd be in my pajamas, crying at my laptop because Power Editor was being wonky and it was awful. Now I have someone who runs all my ads for me. So I primarily use Facebook ads and Amazon ads. And if I ever get a featured deal on BookBub, that's what I do, which of course is what anybody would do. but I maintain that you have to be able to do these things yourself. Am I up to speed on all the current stuff and these ad platforms? No. Could I get there quickly? Yes, I sure could. You can't supervise it, and you can't make decisions on what your ad people are telling you if you don't have your own competence in the whole area of ads, for sure. So you're doing the right thing. And I keep looking at other people's ads and thinking, oh, I think, gosh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that advice is a great place to leave off for today. And then when we pick it up next week with the third episode, we will have our first guest episode. And I'm really excited about that.
Me too. I think it's going to be fabulous.
All right. So we'll talk in a few days.
Yep. All right. Take care. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.